The screener invites students to engage with open-ended, reflected prompts, questions that ask them to share what's really going on beneath the surface. What's been most challenging for you lately? What helps you feel connected at school? What's something you wish adults understood about how you're feeling? These are not checkbox answers. Students are able to tell us in their own words what they're feeling. We heard that yesterday with all of our youth. They don't want to just be data. They want to hear what they have to say, and they feel like they're tired of just being a part of our grant writing and just being another data source. They were very clear about that to us yesterday, as you guys heard. The value of this approach extends far beyond one single tool. It represents a shift in mindset from assessment to understanding, from compliance to compassion. By using a combination of natural language processing, machine learning, and human review, the system allows schools to analyze themes, trends, and needs while preserving the authenticity of student voice. Every response is read, every pattern is noticed, and every insight becomes an opportunity for action. The result, a deeper dive into data-informed understanding and student well-being, earlier identification of needs before they escalate, stronger relationships among students, educators, and mental health professionals, and ultimately, a school culture that feels more connected, safe, and supportive. In short, this isn't just a new way of screening, it's a new way of seeing. We truly need to see our students and ask them what they want to hear, what they want us to hear from them. What's particularly inspiring about this work is how it was built through collaboration and trust. We're all here to collaborate. That's why we come to this symposium. The South County SELPA convened educators, counselors, administrators from across its member districts to co-design and screener, ensuring that it's culturally responsive, developmentally appropriate, and aligned with its local priorities. This collaborative model demonstrates what's possible when public agencies, private partners, and schools work hand in hand. It's not just a pilot or a product, it's a community-driven effort grounded in the belief that every student deserves to be heard and every voice has a value. This initiative has already serving a model for how behavioral health systems can evolve, one that blends data science and with human empathy and technology with trust. It's now my honor to introduce the leaders behind this transformative work. Russell Coronado, the Executive Director of South County SELPA within the San Diego County Office of Ed. Russell has been a champion for inclusive systems and cross-district collaboration, ensuring that every student's needs are met with equity and care. Daniel, co-founder of Impactor Pathway and a public-private partnership expert who brings deep experience in using innovative and technology to advance community wellness. Daniel's work bridges the gap between insight and implementation, turning data into action. And Dr. Joshua, who will serve as today's moderator. Dr. Arnold is the co-CEO of Impactor Pathway, a retired superintendent and a lifelong advocate for student-centered design and education and behavior health. Together, they represent the collaborative leadership that makes this initiative both visionary and practical. As they share their story behind this new approach, from its conception to its implementation, I invite you to listen to two things. First, how centering authentic student reflection can transform the quality and depth of behavioral health data, and second, how data shared ownership between schools, agencies, and communities can sustain the transformation over time. Please join me in welcoming our panelists, Russell, Daniel, and Dr. Joshua, as they present from self-reporting to self-reflection, a new approach to student behavioral health screening.
But first, just really want to thank Elizabeth Estes and the Breaking Barriers team for the opportunity to be able to present and share with all of you today. We'll be talking about public-private partnerships in the school space and talking about data integration of agencies. Really fundamental to what I think it is that Breaking Barriers cares about, and hopefully you find this informative and important. Full disclosure, we're school people, so we're going to sound like school people. And so sometimes that's a little bit of a different lingo with a few different acronyms. And so we appreciate you bearing with us today. Dr. Francisco Escobedo was supposed to join us. He's a California State Board member. He ended up having to go to NASB which is the National Association of State Board Members for a mandatory convening in Austin. So he's unable to join us, but we're here with Danny Byun from Impactor Pathway and Russell Coronado from the South County SELPA and the San Diego County Office of Education. And so with that, we're Impactor Pathway, co-presenting with the South County SELPA in San Diego, and we're talking about a new approach to student behavioral health screening. And what you'll see today does not exist anywhere else, anywhere. And we'll show you what we're doing in San Diego County and then spreading over to Riverside, Imperial, Orange, and LA County inside of schools to create a new style of behavioral health screening with a completely new data set by which agencies can make pinpointed decisions with precision. You'll be hearing from students' voices today. We'll be quantifying their soft skill competencies and creating a new data lake. I'm going to explain it, then we're going to share it, show it. You'll likely have some questions, and we're really excited and prepared for that. And so with that, we'll do some introductions. First, we have with us Russell Coronado, the Executive Director of the South County SELPA in San Diego. South County SELPA has 22,000 students and a number of large school districts inside of it. Russell is unique in that he is a 12-year executive director for the SELPA, and that has put him in a position to take some risks, be innovative. He has deep relationships in the county, very deep. Russell is a former board member, school board member in Chula Vista Elementary School District. If you're familiar with that district, it's the largest elementary school district in the state of California, identified by Linda Darling-Hammond as a positive outlier during Russell's tenure there. Russell hired the superintendent there and was part of that success in Chula Vista. And so we're really happy to have Russell here. And again, he is an expert in this space, and we'll be talking about how we're leveraging this data inside of the school settings. Also with us today is Danny Byun, founder, Impactor Pathway. Danny comes to us as a Silicon Valley entrepreneur. He's been in the after-school space for 25 years in Cupertino and down in Orange County in the Irvine area. He leads public-private partnerships at Impactor Pathway. And he's our technologist and our data science everything. He's the person responsible for our public-private partnerships, able to forge a relationship with the South County SELPA and the San Diego County Office of Education to be able to innovate and do and share what we're about to share with you today. And my name's Josh Arnold, co-founder at Impactor. And before that, I was a California superintendent. I was the superintendent of the Culver City Unified School District on the west side of LA, if you're familiar with that. Then I was the assistant superintendent in North Orange County at a district called Los Alamitos Unified. So I was, if you know Los Al, I was the principal of Los Al many moons ago. So that was a fun little gig. And so I also started a charter network back in 2007, going on its 5th renewal today. So super proud of that. And so with that, I think we'll get started, but maybe we can begin by talking about the fact that schools need absolutely better screening tools, okay? Period, point blank. That is the problem we are trying to solve. You are looking at the current screener in California that's used or attempted to be used in schools. I'm from schools. We don't use this screener. I'm letting you know. I'm letting you know we don't use this screener. It's not in our students' CUMES. Our counselors do not use it. And if we get it, we don't even know what to do with it. That is the truth. Every single counselor, every superintendent will tell you the same thing. And it's not that it's a bad screener. It's not because it's bad. What happens is this is a Likert scale screener. And the data, when you do that, the data is flat. On this particular screener, without getting into the details, you can only mark yes or no. The values on this screener, if you're familiar with it, they populate at the bottom, right? As you put in a yes or a no, it gives you a value of 0, 1, or 2. You add up your numbers, and it's some sort of a numerical decision tree that you're supposed to make a decision by onto whether or not a student qualifies or needs additional behavioral health services in the school setting. This is current. Students are dynamic. And because students are dynamic, and because they live different lives than the students next to them, and especially than the students in the county over from them or in other parts of the state, Likert scale surveys in 2025 are simply not enough. So screeners are going to miss context. They're also going to force language. So screeners are written by psychometricians at a university 25 years ago, and they're forcing language onto a student that a student doesn't own or even necessarily understand or agree with. And so there has to be a better way. And there is a better way. And you all employ the better way already today. You ask a student how they're doing, have a relationship with a student, listen to a young person, and it's going to get you more rich and dynamic data than this. There's a problem, though, with doing that. It's not scalable. You can't have that conversation with everybody, and not everybody on a school campus has that relationship with a student to even have that conversation. So I see some head nods, and we're probably in agreement that maybe Likert scale surveys are a part of a holistic measurement system, but maybe they're not the end all or the be all. What's a way that we can listen to students at scale? And furthermore, what's a way that we can quantify what students are saying to be able to validate some of their behavioral health competencies and do some work inside of the MTSS space, which we'll share with you in a moment. So if I kind of have your attention and we're all on the same page, I'm going to start to kind of get into it. Every student can be heard in 2025. That's a fact. And so if that's possible, we need to try to do that. Technology is a way to do that. And for those of you who are operating in spaces that are fearful of technology, that think AI is only ChatGPT and nothing else, right? I encourage you to pay attention or listen to this next part, because we're going to talk about actual machine learning. We're going to talk about leveraging machine learning at scale to make decisions that humans would also make much cheaper, much faster. So we're going to capture student voice, and we're going to turn reflections into CYBHI-ready indicators that reveal growth and signal needs in real time. And the way that we're going to do that is we are going to, and I'm going to demonstrate for you today, we are going to ask students open-ended self-reflection prompts for which they will use their natural, authentic language to respond. When they respond, pardon me for nerding out, we're not too far from the Silicon Valley, so I apologize for this next part. We are going to map student answers in a multidimensional vector space. That's as nerdy as it'll get. And actually, you're mapping what I'm saying in a multidimensional vector space right now. What am I actually doing up here right now? I am pushing air out of my mouth, and you are discerning meaning from what I'm saying. The way that you're doing that is your brain is mapping my semantic meaning, and it's also using all of your context, everything that you've ever learned about words, about people, about what you're seeing, about what you're hearing, about my emotional resonance, about how authentic I am or not. All of that's happening in your brain right now. That's what we're doing. We've built a brain. We've built a brain that now has been trained on over 5 billion words of K-12 social emotional learning data from students. Highly accurate. We'll get into that in a second. And what we do is we map student A's response to an open-ended reflection prompt, which I'll show you in a moment, and student B's response. Then we co-create a rubric to evaluate these responses, the same as you would do in your school settings or in your agency setting. We develop that rubric with the San Diego County Office of Education and South County SELPA with experts. We train a machine learning pipeline to evaluate that, and then we serve that data back to every single stakeholder in the agency. So, different from California Healthy Kids Survey, where the data is aggregated and anonymized, students never get that data. We serve the data back to the students, we serve it to their parents, to their teachers, to their counselors, to their principals, literally every stakeholder, including the state of California. So this data is reported on LCAPs in aggregate fashion. We'll talk about San Diego Unified School District, Vista Unified School District, other partners that are using this. And this is part of an accountability framework that Impactor is making the argument needs to be considered as a part of a holistic measurement system. All right, let's kind of see it in action. We worked hard to kind of try to do these demos in a PowerPointy way, so hopefully we can pull it off. You're visually looking at what is about to happen. So a student is going to open up a school-issued device. Everything is single sign-on, so you don't have to type in your name, right, or your date of birth, what grade level you're in, anything. It's all through any single sign-on tool you have. Google, Microsoft, I don't want to nerd out too much. If you're familiar with Clever, Clever is a super popular platform for single sign-on that we use inside of school districts. So we already know everything about you that's inside of your SIS. For those of you who don't work in the school space, our SISs are everything. These are legally mandated tools that we must have, and because they report to CalPADS. So that's our everything agency. It's the way actually we get serviced and paid. It accounts for our attendance, our transcripts. So SISs are legal tools. We connect with the school district's SIS, and we become a part of that data framework. So what we're going to do is we're fundamentally going to some students call it a survey. We call it an assessment because it is an assessment, but survey sounds a little bit lighter. And we're going to ask students to reflect. And the way that we're going to do that is through role-based scenarios. This is important. We are not going to have a fictional character pop up on a screen and lead you through a hypothetical. Okay? It's 2025, and every single student is on YouTube, TikTok, etc., experiencing real-world scenarios that they feel that they can relate to, and is also building up some of their language and behavior frameworks for them to actually talk and make decisions. This is exactly what a student experiences through our behavioral health assessment. Oh, volume. Let me make sure.
Or let's think about how you react when someone else needs your comfort or support.
Oops.
Let's think about how we also need to pick.
Okay, let me try that again. Sorry about that. I think I got it.
Now that you've considered how you react when someone else needs your comfort or support, let's think about how we also need to pick ourselves off the ground when we need it. Watch this runner do exactly that. That must have hurt, physically and emotionally. But you saw this runner find the strength to recover and give that race his all. Have you ever faced a situation like that? Talk about a time you had to recover from an upset. How did you react when you failed, and what did you do to get back on track?
I saw some people smiling directly from the browser, by the way. You click audio or video, you're taken to some waveform feedback. A teleprompter pops up if you want to scaffold your answer. If you're an English learner or a student on IEP or a 504, you go ahead and record and you can see timestamp data being collected. We're measuring depth of knowledge levels, DOK levels 1, 2, 3, and 4 over time. And what we're actually doing is understanding your synaptic framework inside of your brain, right? How quickly can you move across DOK levels? And how can you create a linguistic framework from which you can make a decision from? This is Mark Brackett's research, by the way, for those of you familiar with Ruler and the Yale Center. And Mark Brackett's work is precision of language leads to precision of behavior. The first 3 emotional words that all babies learn in any language are happy, mad, and sad. And when you know happy, mad, and sad, you can replicate happy, mad, and sad. But it's very, very hard to replicate being disappointed or feeling prideful. You need that linguistic framework in order to do that. We are measuring that and then creating a predictive analytic on a student's ability to demonstrate growth mindset in one of 3 settings, either their school, their home, or their local community. That's what's actually happening with this tool. This is a behavioral health screener that tens of thousands of students are taking in Southern California every day, and that schools are making decisions on, MTSS, tiered intervention and support decisions on, based on the data coming from these screeners at scale. All right, so the question then becomes, let me make sure I'm working. Um, for both Danny and Russell, question is, what makes self-reflection and authentic voice such a strong foundation for care across behavioral health agencies, particularly schools? And then also, how does natural language give behavioral health teams the qualitative context needed to act and not just assess? And Russell, just kind of want to start that question off with you, and maybe if you want also to share a little bit about how this public-private partnership came into being and some of your work also. I mean, I know you're creating a behavioral health school
Yeah,
in the South County SELPA, if you
yeah,
want to talk about any of that.
yeah. So I became familiar with impactor pathways through Francisco Escobedo and the work that he was doing with them. And as my work as a SELPA director, we look at a lot of different things and a lot of different needs within our SELPA and the special education side, but also the general education side. And I see some former colleagues of mine out here in the audience who can relate to the challenges that we have as SELPA directors, because we have the whole kit and caboodle, even though they think that we are only special education. We deal with all all the areas in education. And one of the biggest needs that I've heard from my colleagues in my school districts and across the state was we need something to help our students coming out of COVID, coming out of all of the stressors that kids are living in with regards to social media. We need to find some way to catch them early. And as a former school psychologist, as Josh was talking about the Likert scales, when we were doing our assessments, we use some of these Likert scales, the Basque and others that ask on, 1 to 5, how does your child do this and that. But the authentic language, the true part of our assessment was when we met with the student one on one and we talked to them. And they were able to express how they were feeling or what was going on with them in that one on one situation, because their authentic language is their identity. And you are able to get a lot more out of the student and infer a lot more of what's going on with them by utilizing that authentic language that they were communicating with me as a school psychologist. So it was all of those types of things that we needed within our SELPA, and the conversation started with Impactor Pathways about the behavioral health screening tool, and if we wanted to partner and develop one with them that would help our districts and help our districts in several ways. One, that it would be very low cost, because that's always an issue for me, is the cost for products for our districts, because and vendors come and go, as you know, within our districts, and a lot of times districts spend a lot of money and then they phase out because of the lack of support or the lack of fidelity with that product. This is something that is going to be very low cost to our district or no cost, and it's going to provide our providers with the type of information that they need in order to be able to tier our students and help those that are most vulnerable. Just in the past week and a half, 2 weeks, 4 months within our districts, and I oversee seven districts of our SELPA. There's been suicides. There's been violent acts of aggression toward other students, and so my districts are looking for this product to help them help their students. And that was the reason we partnered, because we needed something to be able to say, here's a product that the students can use, that will give you enough information for you to be able, as leaders of your school, social workers, counselors, school psychologists, to be able to take some specific action right away with students and then plan for those other students moving forward. And the fact that if you use this tool often enough, year after year, you can see the longevity or the data as to the students that are improving and the students that may need some more attention month after month or year after year. Data is powerful for that reason, and the fact that it's a tool that shows that we could use AI in a very positive way, because there's a lot of negativity with AI out there, and I've been involved in other partnerships where we've used AI and machine learning that have had a positive impact on our students. This is just another way of doing that.
Thanks, Russell. Danny, thinking about the qualitative nature of the data, and we'll show you that in our next section, and the quantitative nature of the data, wonder if you could talk about what you're seeing in terms of students demonstrating their behavioral health skill competencies, what that qualitative data means to schools and districts. I know you're presenting at school board meetings, and you're up in Sacramento. The student narratives we'll share are compelling and powerful. If you could talk about the relationship between the qualitative and the quantitative side of all this data.
Sure. It's great to be with all of you here this morning, and we appreciate the opportunity to share about the work that we're doing. As Josh mentioned earlier, it's 2025. Technology has advanced, and we need to leverage technology in the maximum possible way to be able to support students. And we need to do it in an ethical and mindful way. And as Josh is talking about kind of the qualitative and quantitative natures of the data, I'm going to kind of pinpoint to something that Josh shared earlier about the problem with Likert scale surveys. Josh is talking about how in these Likert scale surveys, and again, which serve their purpose during their time, they are imposing language on the students who are taking those surveys. For example, tell us about how many times in the last month did you express gratitude? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or more, right? That's a question that can be asked in a Likert scale survey. But students coming from different communities might use different language to communicate the same sentiment. So when you say express gratitude to some kids, they might be like, what do you mean? Right? And then they check 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5. Whereas if you give students the opportunity to speak in their own words from the contexts that they're from, for example, when's the last time somebody gave you a gift and how did it make you feel? That's a prompt, an open-ended prompt that all kids, all people can understand. And then by giving them the opportunity to speak in their own words, again, from their own context, in their own language, it gives so much more opportunity for students to respond in natural and authentic ways. One student might say, the last time that I got a gift was last week, and my brother gave me a box of Pokemon cards, and I was so angry because he knows that I don't like Pokemon cards anymore, but he gave it to me anyway. He never says gratitude. But that sentiment that he's communicating in the words is indicative of that lack of gratitude. Another student might say, last week, my best friend gave me a stick of cherry chapstick, and she doesn't really have a lot of money, but because she knows it's my favorite flavor, like she bought it for me, and I appreciate that so much, right? So the sentiment that is being communicated qualitatively through these words is something that cannot be replicated in Likert scale surveys. And like Josh said, the technology exists today for students to be able to communicate their reflections in their own words. Now, when we talk about the quantitative side, how do you measure that? Josh referred to, and Russell did as well, referred to this idea of machine learning. What we've developed at Impactor Pathway is we've developed a scoring algorithm that leverages natural language processing technology. So this is not something that is looking for keywords like gratitude, thank you, but it's something that's designed to analyze the sentiment of the words that are being spoken, in those two examples that I gave. And what we've done is we've actually hired K-12 certified counselors and teachers to be able to take and actually score every student response that came in for the first 100,000 student responses that we had. And we basically gave it a score of 1 through 5. The teachers did, the counselors did. Then we used 80% of that data to actually train our algorithm. This response is a 4. This response is a 2. This response is a 3. So with 80% of our data, we will actually train the algorithm. Then the remaining 20% is used to test the algorithm's ability to match the human scorer. So we refer to that as the trainer. The human trainer is the trainer, and that's the training data that we use. Generally speaking, in K-12, when you have two different scorers using the same rubric, the target is for the two scorers to give that response the same score 70% of the time. And 90% of the time, the target is that those two humans would give it the same score within an adjacent accuracy of 1, with no greater than a deviation of 1. That's what's considered to be compliant in K-12. Our machine learning algorithm is actually scoring over 90% exact score as the human trainer and 97% adjacent accuracy rate to the human trainer. And therefore, that means that we are able to, because all of you know the importance of, as Russell mentioned, the interview, giving the students or the people the opportunity to communicate and share. But the question becomes, who has the bandwidth to review all those responses, right? That's where the bottleneck comes. And so our platform, our solution is able to actually score instantaneously all of these responses that are coming at equal to what a second human would do compared to the training data. We've also adopted what's called an inter-annotator agreement, where after we've trained the model, we don't just kind of let it go, but we're constantly checking, auditing, and fine-tuning. And so we always have a human who is randomly auditing 20% of the responses. So we'll actually pull them out, and then a human will actually grade that response to ensure the accuracy of the machine learning algorithm. And so this is what technology is capable of doing today. And one other clarification that I'll just quickly make is that this is not ChatGPT type of AI. This is AI that's existed for decades. But the reality is the computer hardware didn't exist for this technology to be available at scale. And so within the last several years, that computer hardware has become available to apply it into K-12 in this way. So as we talk about, obviously, student data privacy and security is of the utmost concern. We are totally compliant with all state, federal regulations. We are constantly doing kind of vulnerability testing on our cloud infrastructure. And so the student data is as secure as can be. Those are some of the kind of quantitative and qualitative aspects of the data. So.
Yeah, I just want to say,
Absolutely.
the thing about the authentic language is Likert scales restrict expression for the students. My wife is a social worker, and I'm a psychologist by training, and we've been married 31 years. And I wish we spoke in Likert scales now after 31 years. Would you like the dinner? I strongly agree, but that restricts expression. Yeah, and I think most relationships and psychologists or counselor to student relationship is because you're allowing them to express themselves when you're doing assessments or you're counseling them or in the social skills groups. Scales don't do that. They're hard to interpret and they're hard to get anything out.
Thank you. Let's hear from some kids. And so we collect 5 billion words of data or more a year. It's a lot of data. It's millions of minutes of audio and video. It's not possible for a school system to listen to or watch. We have a lot of tools that bubble up insights about flag warnings and self-harm indicators, all sorts of things that are meant to make it easier for the user. But for the purposes of today, I just want to give you the real example. It's one thing when Danny is sharing a narrative about Pokemon cards and about cherry chapstick, and you can relate to it and you can feel it. But it's different coming from students who have their own lived experiences. Adina Givens is a student from South Central Los Angeles. She was 100% not on her school's radar. She is a B-, C student, didn't have relationships with adults really. She started her Impactor Pathway Behavioral Health series and a number of other language assessments, and her scores were astronomical. Okay? They're actually the highest scores we've ever had. She ends up being identified by her school for being able to demonstrate these soft skill competencies in the context of her community in the Crenshaw district of Los Angeles. Ends up getting nominated for Gates Millennium, wins, is on a $1 million scholarship at UCLA. And the great thing about it is, you know, we have her permission to share, so look her up. Feel free to shoot her a little, you know, LinkedIn or whatever. She'll be happy to receive it. The wonderful thing about Adina is she's super authentic. Also, 83% of her words are 1 and 2 syllable words. So you can't gamify a response through a linguistic framework. Vocabulary won't help you game the system. Click strongly agree for everything. This is Adina's response to a question on self-control.
So when I'm feeling a strong emotion, whether it's like, stress or sadness, sad or anger, what I tend to do is isolate myself. I like to sit by myself and really think about why I'm feeling this way and what made me feel this way. Usually by doing that, by thinking about why I'm feeling this way and what caused it, I'm usually able to get down to the root of it, and 9 times out of 10, I discover something new. Like that's my trauma response because of something that happened to me when I was younger.
No, nobody told her to say that. No, that's really, really important. Nobody gave her a manual. Nobody gave her any instructions. And what are we measuring? We're measuring Adina's ability for reflective self-growth. And even though you may have an opinion on whether or not you would predict she would be able to reflect on her own experiences later, just based on that response, to really do that accurately, you would need a rubric. We have that. You would need a rubric, and you would need to evaluate what you observed through your professional experience on that rubric, and then you would need agreement, okay? And the bottom line for Adina is she's had the experiences that she's had to be able to communicate as an actual linguistic framework for a behavior to happen. Adina is using something called temporal spacing. So, and Adina doesn't know this when she's talking. She's not aware that she's doing this. She's talking about reflective growth over time. That's totally different than a third grader giving you the definition of gratitude. That's a completely different response. Because you know the definition of gratitude doesn't mean you'll be able to execute that behavior. Adina's actually talking about times in which she has specifically reflected and what she has learned from it, and it makes her more confident and you more confident as an evaluator that she'd be able to predict that. This is a behavioral health assessment that is validating competencies. It's looking for the strengths in behavioral health, not just the deficits. But not all students sound like Adina, and not all students have that experience. You're going to listen to a 5th grader who's going to talk on audio, so no video, and they're going to share a response on perspective taking. The question is fundamentally, how do you think others see you? Simple question. I wonder what the student will say.
I think that people think of me as a short and quiet kid. When people are doing their free time, I'm usually just sitting around reading a book, and I don't really socialize that much. I don't really want them to see me this way because, well, I I want to be talkative, but I can't really get into other people's conversations, and I find that kind of annoying.
Let's really talk about this inside of schools. Let's really talk about this. I've worked in school settings with teachers who may or may not recommend the student for special education services and tier 3 interventions as a result of that response. I am 100% serious. And depending on the context of where the student lives, what they look like, all kinds of things lead to over-identification inside of the school system. Okay? What if there were another tool, a part of a holistic measurement framework and system that said, actually, maybe what to do with this student is not call the cavalry because they're having trouble joining other peer groups. Instead, let's talk as a grade level team, potentially, about other data pinpoints on this student. And let's make one of two decisions. Either we can kind of be a little bit more open about our linking of student A to student group B, right? Hey, I want you to sit over there for lunch today. That's one way. And the way you would do that, by the way, is, hey, Elizabeth, I heard your response. Hey, thanks for doing your impactor survey. I heard your response today, and last night. And one of the things I was thinking about is, right, that would be the way to do that. That's okay. That works. Another way is to say, actually, I can facilitate this as an instructor in a way that's, I don't want to say covert, but in a way that's intentional, but not as obvious, and as a way where I can monitor the solution to that's an intervention that a teacher would be doing. That's a real intervention at a very basic level that doesn't require all sorts of services, all sorts of costs, and all sorts of, honestly, disproportionality outcomes that are going to end up happening as a result of that. That's impactor. That's what we're doing inside of schools today. Danny talked a little bit about the data flow. We have these slides. I think they're posted. Feel free to look at them. This is just a little bit about kind of what's happening with the technology. We're collecting raw data. We're labeling that data by soft skill competency. Then we're annotating that data. Then we're evaluating that data through what Danny talked about, an inter-annotator agreement model. So we're hiring, right, credentialed teachers and counselors that are pulling out randomly 20% of all responses and evaluating them. If there's ever a disagreement, by the way, between the human and the machine learning pipeline, human wins, machine learning learns from the human. That's an iterative process that's happening all the time because, I don't know if you know this, but the definition of gratitude changes inside of society over time. The way that students communicate and understand gratitude is different in 2025 than in 2001. And so that's what the machine learning has to be able to do. It has to be able to keep up with that. You can only do that with inter-annotator agreement. The rubrics are key. And Russell and his team at the South County SELPA helped us develop these rubrics. Trust is key. Impactor pathway has a ton of technology inside of it. I'm a K-12 insider. I kind of understand how the system works. But in order to build trust inside of school districts, the fact that this can work, having it co-developed by the South County SELPA, by Russell's team, to be able to say, hey, these are the 6 behavioral health insight questions and competencies our districts care about the most. This is the criteria for evaluation. We're going to co-write the prompts, and we're going to develop the evaluation criteria for both the machine learning pipeline and the human raters. That's so critical and important. It's also important that we iterate and evolve these rubrics over time. So every summer, we get together, our plan is to get together with the South County SELPA and other agencies in San Diego County to be able to evaluate our rubric and to be able to make any changes that we want from year to year. The data that we're serving is longitudinal. And so you're looking at a very familiar vision of an MTSS pyramid in schools. You understand that we offer Tier 1 universal support, Tier 2 and Tier 3. And you probably also understand that these are evaluated at like expected percentages, okay? So if only 30% of your students are getting Tier 1 support, that's going to be very resource intensive on your school or on your district, and it's going to cause you to ask questions about how and why that's happening. So before this behavioral health screener, your school district or your school or your agency has evaluation metrics on your MTSS tiered interventions, resource allocations, and youth served. You have it. You are servicing students in this paradigm right now, whether or not you codify it in this way or not. What Impact or Pathway can do is give you another set of data to say, oh, what we're doing is matching what these behavioral health competencies are showing. That's what we're doing inside of the K-12 system, and saying to school districts, hey, did you know that you actually might be over-identifying your tier 3 interventions and supports as a result of this? We're not saying you are, we're saying you might be. And you might want to look at the strength-based competencies that students are exhibiting to include that in part of your SST process. Am I using too many acronyms? Sorry, I am. And so all of this happens to be reimbursable through CYBHI. And so all of our partners are part of cohort 1, cohort 2, et cetera, working with their TPAs to be able to be reimbursed on the execution and evaluation of the screener. So I want to talk a little bit about that. So currently, if you were in whatever county or school district that you were in, and you didn't like the screening tool from your county agency, potentially, or from the state of California, and you wanted something better, you might make a Google form. You're a teacher, right? You do what you got to do, right? You might make a Google form, and you might ask students a version of some questions on a Google form to be able to make local tier-based intervention decisions in your community. And there are some schools and districts that have been doing that for 20 years, 15 years since Google Forms came out. And so they submit under CYBHI, they submit their local screener for reimbursement. And it's not reimbursable. Because you can't make a Google form survey and say that that's a qualified way of assessing students for medical reimbursement. And so we're trying to meet that need as well. We're trying to say, hey, schools and teachers are doing the best they can with the resources they have. What is a completely low lift, low cost way to do this? And our fundamental premise is to be net zero for districts. So it's a $4.81 reimbursement on the execution and evaluation of the instrument. And the tool for us to pilot it is completely free. And if districts are interested, it's $4.81 for the assessment. So it's a literal net zero cost. It costs school districts nothing. We say it's a no-brainer. Right? So that's the space we're operating in. Want to kind of get some quick insights from Danny and Russell before we end with kind of how the screener gets visualized and how the data populates. But Russell, was wondering if you could talk about what your schools and partners are doing with this data, particularly at the superintendent and cabinet level. I know that you, again, have deep relationships in the county. You have a superintendent council meeting once a month. You're meeting with all of your superintendents. You have relationships with their school boards. You understand at that level that data is used for a different purpose maybe than at the school site and teacher level. Wondering if you could talk a little bit about what your school district superintendents, decision makers, board members are seeing with this data and what they're expecting to be able to do with it.
Well, I think in the end, they're expecting to be able to support all of their students. A lot of data platforms, as you know, they stop at a certain point. The person either running the data, downloading the data, and they either stop at the school level, the principal level, or at the district office, they'll stop at a certain department, and that department takes the data and does what they need to do, and it just does not permeate out. It doesn't generalize across for everyone. This type of platform, the superintendent down, because it's role-based, everyone will have access to this data that is in need of this data. So a superintendent, when they do a site visit, will be able to discuss particular students at a school base. Tell me how such and such is doing based on the data that I just reviewed prior to making a school site visit. I saw that 5% of your students are in tier 1. Tell me about Johnny. What are you doing for him? Because this is what he was expressing in this behavioral health screening. It is at that granular level that the superintendents will be able to be involved in this data not only the satellite view, but also that granular view that they'll be able to ask those specific questions. So that's what the superintendents are hoping to get out of this, to be more involved and be able to be hold people accountable, because that's the other thing, the accountability factor in this. Um, my hope is that that one day, state of California, in its very innovative and forward-thinking state that we are, that there will be a screening requirement for all students across the state of California, because that is what is needed. Every school out there, whether you're a school of 500 elementary school or a comprehensive high school of 3,000 students, it's very difficult to get to all the students. School counselors do not get to all the students. How many of you spoke to a school counselor more than one time in your 4 years of high school? It just doesn't happen. Majority of people do not see their counselors, and the majority of students are going through some issues. And if we had this screening tool for everyone, we would be able to put a finger on students to be able to say, these are the ones that we need to act on immediately. These kids are great. Let's direct them toward leadership roles, whatever it is. But that's my hope, and this is the hope of my superintendents, that it becomes, and they're looking at it, the school wide, after the piloting, the school wide implementation, so that they can be able to say to their constituents, to the community, we're looking out for all the kids. We're looking out for each one of them, and we know how they're feeling, and we want to be able to direct our resources in a manner that's going to benefit them all.
Thank you. I'm a former superintendent. I'm appointed by Board of Education, and my Board of Education holds me accountable for student results, period, point blank. I need validation. I can't hire 10 counselors and say, it feels like it's going well. I can't do that. I can't spend $1 million of recurring expenses a year in a collective bargaining environment and say, yeah, people love Miss McNally. She's great. That's not how it works. And so what we're seeing with our behavioral health data is a couple of things. We're seeing validation of mission, of programmatic expenditures, of initiatives, of people, of time. This is not a tool that's looking for deficits only. This is really trying to validate what's going on. And you're looking at the deal that we're making with students. Go ahead and take the current behavioral health screener that's available through the state of California today, and you'll get nothing back. You won't know what it means. Maybe somebody will talk to you about it. Maybe they won't. That's pretty unfair. That's pretty unfair, to be honest with you. This is student level data that students are getting back, that parents are getting back, that's building trust and transparency within the school district. We see this in San Diego Unified School District, where implementation of Impactor Pathway has built a ton of trust between the school district and the community in terms of saying, hey, I'm really glad that the school district values this and is actually measuring this and showing me how my students are doing in their setting.
It's also it's so powerful for the staff to have, but imagine what it does for the students as well, to be able to know what your strengths are and where you need support in. And a lot of times as adults, we go through these activities, the strength finder activities, to find out what personalities we have or what strengths we have. Our students need that too, and they need that at a very young age to be able to help them help themselves as well.
This is part of the data that we get back in a role-based permission system for the adult users. So we're going to be able to, again, with screeners, you cannot be diagnostic, and we don't attempt to be. I think schools know the solutions that they can provide. We can help you identify who may be in need of those solutions based on your particular MTSS implementation and framework. We're actually evaluating those soft skill competencies that you see on the bottom left, right? So we're evaluating compassion, curiosity, and giving you metrics on those competencies by cohort. So that literally the data that we're providing is, did you know that African American girls from X middle school in 8th grade have the highest purpose development of any cohort of students in this district? Why is that? Have we ever measured that before? What's going on either at that school or in our community that's leading to that? Hey, did you know that students who don't take algebra by 9th grade have the lowest curiosity development of any cohort of students in this school district? This is real data that we're uncovering. This is what we mean about being inside and fully integrated into the student information systems that schools are using, that county agencies can leverage. This is public and transparent data that we're getting. You would have access to this with your counseling relationships, similar to a CUME. This is inside, this is the equivalent of a digital CUME. You could get a student's curiosity score longitudinally over time, or something like self-control. Hey, did you know that this A+ student who's wonderful at everything, and in AP everything, and in honors everything in every sport, has consistently struggled with self-control since 4th grade? Here's the data. I bet you that would be really, really helpful for a teacher, counselor, school psych, county agency to know when interfacing with that student and family. That's what we mean by data. Quantitatively, what school districts are sharing is things like this. Did you know that even though our reading achievement didn't go up more than 2% last year, the emotional resilience of our students grew 12% year over year? We have the empirical data to be able to report that and share that with the state of California and with our stakeholders. So we're continuing to grow in reading. We're spending all of those resources and monies in that area. And we're also really proud of the emotional resilience competencies that we're developing inside of our students. As a quick visual of like what this looks like, this is what students facing. So students are getting a scaled score metric to be able to understand what we call their impact or potential score inside of a framework. Students can actually click and understand, they can see their last video response, and they get feedback on those responses in 4 categories: next steps, college and career readiness, strength areas, and growth areas. This is a recursive process for students. They're getting something back from it, and guess what that does? That makes them more willing and more interested in taking the screener again. So we're seeing school districts implement this screening 2 times a year, 4 times a year, as a part of understanding students and giving them and the system more data by which to make decisions from. And so we're really, really proud of what we've been able to do. And I apologize if this is too schooly, but what you're looking at here are what we call the impactor anchor attributes, and they're tied to every California dashboard outcome. I'm a school superintendent. We're held accountable to the California dashboard, period, point blank, or we don't keep our jobs. And so the argument that Impactor is making is, hey, your attendance is down, let's say like 2% year over year. By the way, that's huge. That's a lot of dough inside of a school district. That's a lot. So you know what school districts do? They buy a calling system and they call more. They call the home more. Because if we call the home more, then the students will want to come to school, right? That's what we'll do. And what we're saying is, did you know that purpose is the #1 skill competency linked to attendance? And that if you want to help a student attend school more, you should identify their purpose development in 4th grade, then in 6th grade. And if they're lagging in purpose development compared to their peers, you should create a purpose-laden intervention like they do in Calexico Unified, a partner that we work with. They find the cohort of boys and girls in 6th grade, first year of middle school, who have the lowest purpose development. And they offer an intervention after school called the Brotherhood or the Sisterhood. It's a youth mentor who comes in with those students and works on the development of short, medium, and long-term goals. What a better idea than a calling system. That's the power of data in the system. So what do you need for that? You need a tool students will use, data that's reliable and valuable, and then some professional development to help understand from a data literacy standpoint for every stakeholder in a school district or a system what to do with self-control data, what to do with perspective-taking data. What do I do with that? What would I do with that? I'll tell you about perspective-taking. Perspective-taking is the #1 competency lacked by many of our honors and AP students. 4.8 GPA, on your way to Stanford, can't work in a group. Somebody should tell you that. Somebody should, you're 17 years old, somebody should let you know that's something you need to work on. That's the kind of data that we're leveraging. And so, Danny, as we kind of get to the end of our time, wanted to kind of talk about the integration of this data across agencies, what you're seeing as you're building public-private partnerships at the school level, at the county level, and how all of this data is being leveraged to, again, make some of the decisions I referenced earlier, and how counties and agencies are leaning into this data as a way to be part of a holistic measurement system, not the end-all be-all, but an additional way that we can have some information to make some decisions.
Yeah, thanks, Josh. One of the things that we're really seeing these days, obviously, with kind of the rise of social media and coming out of the pandemic shutdown, kids, not even just kids, even adults, we're still kind of reeling from everything that's happened. But really, with kids, during very formative times of development, they've been impacted in so many ways. And when we see kind of the work that's happening in schools and in districts related to the support of kids, we're very concerned about their socio-emotional well-being. But a lot of that also has to do with kind of the climate and the culture of schools and just the community as well. And so we are doing a number of different, as Josh mentioned, partnerships where we are, for example, supporting Yucaipa Cali Mesa School District to actually capture student data and their kind of perspective on school climate and school culture. We're then working with different stakeholders within the community to also capture adult input and perspective as well, doing a similar thing in San Mateo Foster City School District up in the Bay Area. Because ultimately, as we talk about this data and we talk about how to be able to best support kids, it's not something that just happens because they take a screener and then somebody meets with them and makes a recommendation on some type of an exercise that they might do to feel better the next day. But obviously, it's something that the community as a whole needs to all come together and really, and that's really what Breaking Barriers is about. It's integrated supports across different systems and agencies, right? Because it takes a village to be able to support the kids. And again, it's not even just the kids. I was talking last night at the mixer with some different people, and they were saying, "Man, I think we need this for adults." But it's true, because even as you look at what happened during the pandemic shutdown, counselors all across America, 1-year waiting lists. There wasn't enough support, for the people who needed it. And so, to that end, Impactor is also doing some pilots in, workforce and in higher ed, because this is a platform and a solution that really can support not just kids, but people. And so, but, from a standpoint of kind of, cross institutions and agencies, the value of the data, it's tremendous because we're talking about climate, we're talking about culture and how those things impact students as well. So.
Thank you, Danny. Really appreciate all of your time and attention. Happy to share more. Happy for you to call out to any of the folks that we work with to learn from them how they're leveraging natural language processing and authentic student data by which to make these kinds of decisions. We have a session right afterwards for those interested in asking some questions, a little bit more specific use cases. Happy to share more about the kind of technology, the validity, kind of all of those components. To be honest with you, this is a full-throated attempt with lots and lots of resources baked in and underneath all of this from an implementation standpoint, including playbooks on what to run, professional development series. There's a whole bunch to this. But the fundamental takeaway we hope that you have today isn't about impact or pathway, but is more about the fact that in 2025, authentic student language can be captured at scale, leveraged, and quantified to help professionals like you make more precise decisions. Not better decisions, not different decisions, but decisions based on more data that can be more precise in their intervention and then by proxy more effective. I think students deserve that in 2025. I think Likert scales are part of the process perhaps, but if you're not capturing a student's lived experience, their culture, their identity background, just laden in everything that they do and every piece of who they are, our argument is that we can do better. And so happy to share more. Thank you to Breaking Barriers and Elizabeth Estes, and thank you to all of you.
Thank you.